Hello and welcome back to another video. Today's video will be about the other subject which was a part of the last poll in the community section. So this poll was about which topic the next video should be about. And the two subjects were the Gutians on the one hand and the history of the Bessarabia Germans on the other hand. Due to the reason that the history of the Bessarabia Germans won the vote, I at first made a video about the Bessarabia Germans, but as I already said in the video about the Bessarabia Germans, I also want to talk about the Gutians and if the Gutians may have been Indo-Europeans. And this also will be the topic of today's video. But let's start right from the beginning. Who were the Gutians anyway? The Gutians were a people which settled east to ancient Mesopotamia. They first became really relevant in the 3rd millennium before Christ. At this point in time, they were regarded by the peoples which lived in Mesopotamia and had established their civilizations there as a rather undeveloped people which lived in a tribal society and led a largely nomad lifestyle. But when the Mesopotamian states had internal problems, such as power struggles in the late 3rd millennium BC, the Gutians were able to use the situation to their benefit and they managed to invade Mesopotamia and to submit the cultures of Mesopotamia to their rule. It is not exactly known which form or shape this Gutian reign over Mesopotamia took, but it is likely that they dominated Mesopotamia for around 100 years. And the thing that is interesting about the Gutian rule of Mesopotamia is that the Gutians were actually considered both by the Sumerians and Akkadians very directly as foreigners. After their rule over Mesopotamia ended around the year 2050 BC, the following Akkadian and Sumerian kings would even describe the Gutian language as very foreign. Something that needs to be considered in this context is that while some of these languages which were spoken in Mesopotamia actually were part of an ancient Semitic family, other languages such as Sumerian were actually language isolates. So the languages in Mesopotamia were by themselves already not always that tightly connected. But the Mesopotamians all described the language of the Gutians as very foreign. And this is even something that the later king Hammurabi would explicitly describe about the Gutians. Now, the Gutians themselves never left any written texts in their own language. So it is not really surprising that not a single coherent text in Gutian language is known. But the one thing that may be a remnant of the Gutian language is that there is actually a rather detailed list of Gutian kings which ruled over Mesopotamia. And this is where things may get interesting, because the names of these kings show no large similarity to the peoples which lived in Mesopotamia at this point and wrote down texts in their own languages at all. But the names of these kings may actually show some similarity to words which can be found in Indo-European languages. And this, combined with the fact that even the Mesopotamian peoples of that time described the Gutian language to be quite foreign, led to the theory that the Gutians actually could have been Indo-Europeans. Since not much is known about the Gutians anyways, the following theory will mainly stick to linguistical evidence. Walter Bruno Henning was a German-born linguist who in his later years mainly lived in the United States. And he started to compare the names of these kings to more eastern branches of Indo-European languages. And the thing that is interesting is that he noticed some similarities between the names of the Gutian kings and the Tocharian language. Now the Tocharians themselves are kind of an enigma, because their language was very distinct from other Indo-European languages and the Tocharians also went extinct already some 1000 years ago. So the language of the Tocharians themselves is already dead. But Henning argues that something that was nearly always quite typical for Indo-European peoples is that they were rather expansionist. So Indo-Europeans originally came from what is now essentially southern Russia, spread their language and culture all over the European continent and even into India. But apparently the Tocharians did not expand at all from their homeland. And Henning assumes that it may be very well possible that the Tocharians had a point in the history on which they expanded into other regions. And he argued that it may be possible that the Gutians were actually Tocharians, which expanded roughly some 2000 years before Christ, from the homeland of the Tocharians westwards down to Mesopotamia. Another main argument of Henning is also that it is known that Tocharians called themselves Gutian. So while the name Tocharian actually bears little to no resemblance to the name of the Gutians, the name which used the Tocharians for themselves, Gutian, is quite more similar to Guti and therefore Gutian or Gutians. In later periods there also existed the empire of the Yutzi in what is now Western India, but the Yutzi originally came from what is modern days northwestern China. And at least in the historical context in which Henning lived, it was considered to be possible that the Yutzi actually were somewhat connected to the Tocharians, because the Tocharians also lived in exactly this region from which the Yutzi sprung. And at this point you can see again a certain similarity between the name of the Guti and the Yutzi. It should be also noted that today it is considered that the Yutzi were most likely Gutians, so they were Indo-Europeans but they were not Tocharians. Although these reports were mainly written down by Chinese scholars, so it could be possible that they simply used the term Yutzi in this context to describe any peoples which lived to the northwest of their realm. But these would be the main points of Henning's theory about the Gutians and why they might have been Indo-Europeans. So as you can see, the evidence is mainly of linguistical nature. Mainly for this reason Henning's theory is nowadays regarded as rather unlikely. So the Gutians will most likely also remain in the near future ethnically anonymous. But I nevertheless thought that this theory is kind of interesting, and this is also the main reason why I wanted to share it here. So this video was a bit shorter again, but I nevertheless hope that you enjoyed it and that you learned something. And I hope as always to see you on the next video again. See you then.